So let's start with it. I hope that Pina will join us when she fixes all her. Okay, yeah, let's start. First of all, speaking about your experience in Cuba, how much time have you been there in total, maybe? Because I know that you visited it several times. Yeah.
Yes, so I think in total I've been in Cuba for close to 18, 19 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there for 3 months. So I got a taste of it initially, and then I spent 6 months and 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had three visits to Cuba, and like I said, I mean it's not conventionally home. I'm still from Delhi, I'm still from India, but Cuba it's become home um, over time, which is which is a very special thing to have developed. So yeah, 18 months, 18 to 19, or close to 19 months.
Mm-hmm. So, and what are your plans? Are you going to go there for some more
So
months?
I do, yeah, I am looking forward to visiting again this July.
Uh-huh.
The more time I spend here, I realize that I do miss going back, and that is going to keep on happening. And I do see myself visiting every week, every year at least,
Mhm.
for a couple of months, however, logistically it makes sense at that point of time. But and I'm just gonna add the caveat that I don't think I'm alone in this. I do have a lot of friends from around the world who, for no rhyme or reason, find time to visit Cuba, visit and spend time in Cuba periodically because in many ways it feeds their soul. And I completely relate to that because it feeds mine for sure.
Mhm. And what is it? So what gives you this sense that you need to go there again and again?
Um, I I think I have learned a lot about humanity living in Cuba. I don't remember when it started because I was going in with very less context about the country. In India, we are literally a half a planet away from this tiny island in the Caribbean. And I went in not knowing Spanish. I went in not having great knowledge about their history. And the first feeling I remember having was security. You're just in Cuba and you feel safe. You feel safe, but because you're never really alone, even when there are so many layers that we usually think we need to cut through to connect with people.
Mhm.
But in Cuba, it's just always so natural. And this is a story that I always talk about. I remember somebody came to pick me up from the airport, and they were tasked to drop me at my Airbnb. And this was a very important function because I did not know Spanish at the time, and it was coming out of India and going into this country for the first time. And he takes me to the address. His name was Jesus. He's a dear friend. He looks around for the address. He sees the house. He knocks. He goes in, and then he goes into the kitchen, and then he has a cup of coffee with the owner. And I'm just looking at all of this, and I'm like, okay, maybe they all know each other because they're catching up, they're talking about the weather, they're talking about what's happening around. And then the Airbnb owner comes to me and she says that, oh, it's okay. She knew that I did not know Spanish. None of them knew English, by the way, just to add like another layer of confusion to this story. And they talk, and I'm like, oh, maybe they all know each other. And then she's like, oh, it's okay if you don't know Spanish. My daughter is going to be here soon. She speaks a little bit of, and now I know that's what she meant, but all of this was sign language. And I was like, okay. So a bit confused, I went. And after a while, I realized that Jesus was meeting the Airbnb owner for the first time as well. And he had just gone in, made himself home because it was home, because they were part of the same community, because they were part of the same city. And I was completely alien to this sense of connection that humans can have with each other. That you could just say hello to somebody and be friends with them, and have the ability to have your heart open to them. Of course, sharing a cup of coffee might not seem like a very big task to another person, but for a person who was coming from a completely different context, who for everybody was a stranger for me, and I realized that I do not have to spend an X amount of years to be friends with somebody, to have a community of my own. And that just changed so much personally for me, because I felt home right away, even though I have a home back here in India as well. But it didn't matter. You could have home anywhere, you can find connections. And in Cuba, the hearts are open and
Mm.
the connections thrive.
Well, you spend lots of time there, sort of, in comparison to us, at least. So, what makes them so open-hearted and so friendly and sort of ready to be your true friend, not just pretend that as it usually could be felt, for example, in Europe, when everybody is very friendly, sort of very nice, but they would not allow you to be very close. What makes them so sincere? That's
So I can have theories, and that's what I can share.
Mhm.
One thing that I have noticed, which is very common across a lot of Cubans, is their curiosity and their love towards diversity, differences. And it's love and a lot of respect.
Mhm.
And they take a lot of pride in differences, as opposed to thinking of those things as something that holds them back or keeps them apart. Um, and again, I'm gonna like break into another story because that's just what I do. Cuba and a lot of anecdotes. I remember taking my friend Dixie. So Dixie was a US citizen and she visited Cuba. She fell in love with the country, like a lot of us have already. And she decided to just stay back and stay there. So, as part of one of our field visits, we took Dixie with us to just talk to people. And Myra was there. You all already know Myra. Myra is our friend in Cuba. And I spent 20 minutes watching both Myra and Dixie connect over the fact how both of them have Asian blood in their body. Because Dixie was originally from the Philippines, and Myra then started looking through her entire family tree to figure out how she has some relative or some family member from almost every continent in the world. And that was not something that made her unaccepted or different or part of another community. Her differences were just embraced by her, and she used her differences to connect with another individual whom she thought might feel a little out of her, space. And that's just beautiful, because I even in my neighborhood, the street I live in, I'm known as the Indian girl who lives. So it's not a bad thing that I'm not Cuban. They would accept you just as you are, no matter how absurd it might seem to other people. There is no judgment whatsoever. Um, and that's where their generosity and their kindness comes from, because they don't understand why a person is going to be mean or cruel to another person, because everybody is just human at the end of the day. And I think that's what makes their heart be open. Their The fact that they don't see difference as something that needs to be hated on. They don't see difference as something that should be put aside or feared. They embrace it. They're curious about it, and they want to assimilate it as part of their culture. That's why Cuban culture, to be Cuban is to be whatever you are or whoever you are. And that's why a lot of people around the world do and would identify themselves as Cuban also by heart. And Yeah, that makes up for a very beautiful city, a very beautiful country at that.
That's precisely what I wanted to ask you. So usually we identify ourselves as part of some state or territory, for example, being Cuban, is sort of citizenship or place or belonging to some culture or nature or nation. And in this case, if you are speaking about such a diversity and totally disconnection with any sort of culture or nationality, so what would make a Cuban Cuban? So what is the feature which makes a person Cuban? What do you think?
I've been called Cuban a lot of times. I have been told that, oh, she's almost Cuban now, and I think that's how they see Cubanness as well. For them, it's about. I usually try to phrase it. This is how I have understood it. It's a very juvenile way of understanding, but I'm just going to share it regardless. Um, Whenever you meet a Cuban, the moment you say hi, you're his or her friend, because that's just how they are. And you spend more time with them, and then you become best friends. And then there comes a point where they accept you. And when they accept you, you end up being family. So today morning I was talking to Frank. Frank is another friend of ours from Cuba. And he doesn't say hello, Karthika. He says, uh, hola, hermanita. So he calls me his little sister. And when I talk to Martha, who is another friend of ours from Cuba, she calls me her granddaughter. And one day I was sitting and having dinner with Myra, and she was trying to understand how she fits in this ecosystem. And she declared herself my aunt. And that is a family that has just developed so naturally that I can't differentiate it from the one that I was born into. I think that's what it means to be Cuban. If you have an open heart and if you have space for other people, I think you are Cuban. And I really wish that there are more Cubans out there in the world. I tried to be a better Cuban every day. So it doesn't have to be, I could see that's the thing, just because I identify with Cuba does not mean I'm any less of an Indian. My one identity doesn't compete with another.
Mm.
Everybody's heart is big enough, and there is enough love and space for everybody. That's what Cuba teaches everybody, I think.
No, that's fantastic. So it's mostly a sort of belonging to some uh, philosophy. I think it mostly sort of connected to
And
this.
yeah, I think it's not just people. I have seen even the state behave this way. So, despite the logistical, the material limitations the state has faced, they have never shied away from supporting another nation because they never see the existence of their nation as like another nation's existence as a threat to their own. Of course, we can go down the path of political theory and talk about, oh, it's an island and they don't face the same problems as we do. But when there was this kind of support that they have sent to Africa, the kind of medical support that they have provided to Latin America, the amount of scholarships they have for the kids in Central Asia, in so many other developing nations, it's unreal. There are, despite all the material limitations and the sanctions and the problems that Cuba faces, they're always open to supporting others. Because, and I think it comes from a very deep sense of security. You never feel threatened by another identity when you have and when you know who you are. And I think it's not just the people, but the structures and the leaders and the state which reflect that sense of security, which makes them so kind. Even the conference that we attended together in January, the president didn't come in and started talking about how great Cuba is. He spoke of compassion. And uh, I really think that if more heads of state start talking about compassion rather than how powerful or how rich or how influential they are, the world will automatically become a better place to be.
That's so strange. First of all, I didn't know that in this very hot situation, Cuba state supports other nations. I didn't know this. So yeah, that's fantastic. And maybe this could be, uh, so maybe you could tell more about it, what you know, or maybe you can just refer to some sources
So
which can.
I uh, I can just in bits and bob tell you the people that I've met and the programs that I've known of.
Mhm.
So Cuba actually came up with 5 vaccines during COVID, and they were developed indigenously, and they gave away a lot of those vaccines for free to developing nations. And this was at the height of COVID when they were advanced economies selling their drugs. Cuba gave it away. I do know a lot of medical students who come from Central Asia, who come from Latin America, and they get scholarship to come and study in Cuba. Their residence is taken care of. They are given a bit of stipend to take care of their needs, and they have to go back and serve their country as medical professionals. And we often have examples of how we have scholarships where people come in and then they stay in that particular place to support the economy of the state which sponsored them. But the rule is that you're going to come in, you're going to get the best knowledge, and you're going to go back and serve your own country. They have already a history of sending medical professionals to Venezuela, to a lot of neighboring nations. And of course, it sometimes does come at a cost of, as a deal, that you please support us in this regard and we'll support you in the other. But even with the Gaza issue, like we have a lot of people sending a lot of support. They have had so many marches and so many statements, even in the international, platforms where they have actively advocated and said that this is injustice, and they have taken a stand. Whereas a lot of other nations have shied away from it, and they have their own reasons, and there are very real reasons to doing so. But when it comes to taking a stand about supporting people who need the support, Cuba has been quite forthright. It has been out there advocating and walking the talk. So it's not just, oh, I'm going to be compassionate in my own home. They have gone out there and they have showed the world who they are unapologetically. So, of course, there are a lot of programs that they do. A lot of people from Palestine, actually, medical students from Palestine, are actually studying in Cuba today and getting the support from the state. And the way I got to know about them is because they have student mixers. So it's not just, oh, we're going to give you money and you study. They have cultural events for them. They to make sure that they have a community that they can get support from, a shoulder to lean on when things get tough back home. And these are things nobody talks about because these are not. I have never, if I was not in Cuba and if I would not have spent as much time as I have and I've not talked to the amount of people I have, I would have never gotten to know about them. But the more I think about, the more respect I have for this country and its people.
That's interesting. In this case, so many states nowadays are so concerned of their, you mentioned, of their security. Again, security on different levels, be it security of state, sort of the borders, security of culture, of education, of economical security. And in this position, when we know that there are even problems with food security in Cuba, how does it happen that they in this very harsh situation they are so open and maybe so fearless, I would say? So how would you explain it?
Again, I can give you my guesses. And again, I can break into another story, which is my visit to the art university in Cuba, which is the most unlikeliest place I thought I'll get an answer. Um, Spending time in Cuba, I realized that we need to feed ourselves as humans the material at a material level. We need to eat food, we need to consume, and we need to feed our souls. And these are two different kinds of feeding. So when I'm having a meal, I'm feeding myself. But when I'm maybe reading my favorite book, when I find some time and I'm feeling good about it, that's me feeding my soul. Um, Sometimes I feel we struggle to balance both. We are so we're so restless and we're so scared that we might not be able to feed ourselves materially. We end up focusing too much on that. In Cuba, I have found a reverse problem. And I won't call really it a problem, it's just a reverse phenomena. I walked into an art school, and it was an art school for high school students. And it was only for artists, which sitting in India, I couldn't have fathomed. Because, when you talk about arts, when you talk about culture, it always remains in the periphery of academics, of education. You never just go up and say that, oh, I'm going to be an artist and that's what I'm going to do, unless you're exceptional, unless you're like the next Leonardo da Vinci. That's not happening for you. And I feel like I have done that myself in my life, where I used to play basketball. And then after a point of time in my high school, I had to decide that if I want to be more focusing, I should be focusing on academics, because life, you need to take practical goals. Or can I chase my dream, a crazy dream of being a basketball player? And I made my choices and I was at peace with them. Not that I do not enjoy the path that I chose, but I think the decision I took was also because I knew that I was not extraordinary. I was not an extraordinary basketball player who was going to revolutionize the entire world. But when I walked into that university, I saw such joy in the students' eyes, just doing art. It didn't matter if they weren't the Da Vinci's of the world. It didn't matter if it was art that, oh, anybody could have made it. Because I don't think anybody in Cuba makes art which anybody could have made, because the creativity comes from a different place. It comes from a place of freedom, that an artist is art is worth doing. Creativity is important. Feeding your soul is essential for you to lead a life which is more meaningful. The number of exhibitions, the number of cultural events, the number of uh, art events that happen in Havana, in Cuba, is unreal. Every province is supposed to have a art and culture center. I fell in love with ballet when I was in Cuba, because I always imagined ballet to be this very elitist dance form, which can only be afforded by the super rich. And I never thought that I would be the kind of person who's going to be getting tickets to go for a ballet show. But they're super cheap. In Cuba, they're the most economical tickets that you go. It's cheaper to get a ticket for ballet than to maybe have a meal at a fancy restaurant in Cuba. And when I went there, it was just beautiful. And it was open for everybody. It didn't matter if from which part of the society you came from. We all went to Cajon de Hamel, the art street. And the philosophy behind that street was that art belongs to everybody. It is important to find beauty in everything. It's important to acknowledge the fact that you deserve beauty, that you deserve creativity, that you deserve freedom. And I think when your soul is satisfied, when you're a secure individual, it changes the way you look at life. You understand what the priorities are. What quality of life do you want to lead? How many concessions are you willing to make to just live another day? Or do you want to truly live a life which is full and meaningful and something that you can be proud of? So that's my answer. It's a very roundabout way of giving you an answer, I admit. But maybe that's what keeps them standing, because their souls are full and they are vibrant. And when your soul is full, you understand that you can always take care of your material needs. Of course, there are issues with food security in Cuba, but there are always going to be homes which are going to provide you a free meal if you're having a bad day. that's just who Cubans are. That's just how Havana has treated me. And I think it's just extraordinary.
Yeah. Maja, would you like to add something about your experience?
Um, well, I mean, it was really nice just listening to the stories Karthika said, because even though I only spent there, 3 weeks, I can already identify with many of them, like when she was talking about having this family around the world, I mean, across the world, I also got to, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to also got to experience that, um like having Natalia and Marta calling me their granddaughter from abroad, which is a very, I think, special kind of feeling, because it's not just a saying, that you have a family in another part of the world. I actually feel it. I actually feel as I do have it. Um, so yeah, just I like to say that Cuba definitely surprised me in many ways, but in the most special kind of ways, because of that sense of belonging. Like, because I was running around doing errands in Havana in the first couple of days, I didn't really feel there as a tourist, but that was also because of all the people there, because everyone was there to give me a hand, to help out, to make me, I mean, in a way, feel at home and accepted. And it's truly something I've never experienced anywhere before.
In this, thank you. And in this case, I wanted to suggest you to think, maybe to find the question. So again, there are some concrete problems with the we discussed with food, with some very essential things which we need. It's not about some luxury. It's mostly about things which people need to more or less feel, again, health secure and in this case. And at the same time, we understand that despite of the fact that it is rather challenging, Cuba is more or less open. So young people who feel these challenges, they might think about looking for better life somewhere abroad. And again, maybe some years ago, before internet, before this openness of information, we might think that they might think that sort of Cuba is my motherland, and there is no place like home, and so on and so forth. So in this case, we see now that watching sort of YouTube or any other sort of news about from abroad, young people mostly young people, because we understand that grown-ups are mostly sort of used to the place, and they have families. It's sometimes more challenging. But what makes young people stay in Cuba, stay connected to their country, and even if they go abroad, and we heard the stories that people went abroad, they received, for example, European education, but they returned back in order to support and to develop their own country. So what makes these people do so? And when I'm asking this question, it's not only on the individual level, but also it is about the economic security of the country as well, because most countries which have economic problems and food problems, developmental problems, they understand that young people would leave these countries in pursuit of the better life. And in this case, states become very protective of sort of anything. And in this case, we see the opposite situation of Cuba. You, Karthika, just shared the stories that sort of the state sends their best people abroad to help and share medicines in the situation where they don't have money enough to sort of to fix their houses and to provide food for their own people. So this felt sort of contradictory to some extent. And again, that's on the state level, and on the individual level, this also sort of is a question, is puzzling, what makes people go back and stay in the country and support their country and work for their country. So, Kartika, what's your understanding of this phenomena? And then, Pina, maybe you could also share your point of view about it.
So I've had diverse experiences when it comes to people leaving or coming back to Cuba. So before we even get to everything, I would like to talk about the fact that Cuba does face a problem of people leaving. And not talking about this is going to be an incomplete, it's going to be an incomplete conversation if we do not address the fact that there are a lot of young people leaving the country uh, quite regularly. Like it's a problem in Cuba. And I say this because it's a partly personal experience also. Like many of my friends who were there last year when I was in Cuba have left Cuba now for a lot of different kind of reasons, and I've had the opportunity to have conversations about it with them before they were leaving and after they have left. Of course, everybody goes for different reasons. There is a material aspect to it as well, that hey, I need to make sure that my family is comfortable enough and they're able to provide for their family in terms of food security being a very real issue, medicines being a very real issue. The sanctions have made it incredibly difficult for the state to get a lot of essential medication. I have friends with young friends my age with diabetes, and their challenge is finding insulin and the syringes because they're very difficult to find in the market. I have friends whose parents are dealing with mental health issues like schizophrenia, but because they're not able to have the medication, it's turning into, they're losing that connect with their parent because they're not able to manage their symptoms. People with heart diseases are not able to access medicines, and this is a very real issue in Cuba. So when you put all of those very practical pragmatic problems in front of yourself and you say that, hey, what can I do, a lot of young people end up concluding that I need to leave and make sure that I can get all of those things for my family in terms of money, in terms of resource, in terms of tools, whatever it is. And they do end up making the decision to leave. What I have observed is that they're not leaving out of apathy towards the state or the country. It breaks their heart to leave. It breaks every parent's heart to send their child away. But it happens because of very practical and logistical reasons. Is there something that Cuba can do about it? Of course, there is a lot. I think not just Cubans, I think we as a world, like us as the global society, can do a lot to improve and like just support in any way we can. Why people come back, and I have people who have come back also. There's this a dear friend of mine who studied agroecology in the Netherlands, and he was a queer man in Netherlands living his best life after getting higher education from there. And after spending a couple of years, he's like, I need to come back because I need to be home. I need to live in a place where I can connect. And he did come back, and he is back. And what he does is he rears a farm. He has a farm of his own. He has a cafe, and every time. So, and the reason we got together was because we were working together in a project about food security. Every time there is somebody who says that, oh, I need this seed, he's like, okay, I have a moto, I have a bike of my own. Anybody in Cuba who needs a seed, I'm going to go and get it for them, so that that's not an excuse that they used to not plant and grow food. And he, I think, staying outside, and I had this conversation with him, and he said, I was materially satisfied. I had enough resources for myself, but I was missing the community. I was missing that warmth that people have in Cuba. And I have felt that warmth also because when you're so caught up in your own insecurities, you alienate yourself from society. You cut you cut connections. You say that, oh, maybe I'll not text that friend because I have not talked to him or her for like a while, and they have not texted me also. And maybe you feel shy to reach out to your extended family because, oh, well, I'm going to be uncool if I do that. And then I think the heart becomes a little cold because you're just so isolated. But then when I'm in Cuba, and I can only speak for myself, but when I'm in Cuba, there is just so much warmth. It's just the fact that every time somebody meets you, they hug you and they give you a kiss. And it's just those small and big actions which warm your heart. And I understand how important it is now because of having gone through that experience. But I think my friend who was in the Netherlands at the time, who had grown up in that setting, was missing it and he came back. But another very real thing is that it's not that everybody who wants to come back is able to come back. He was lucky to have the resources that he had, which helped him come back. A lot of people go out of very real problems without a return ticket. And a return ticket is not easy to get, especially when there are very real challenges that they face in the country that they're going to as well. So you do not, so in Cuba, you might be a doctorate, a researcher who has a good job at the university, but when you go out, you're just a 20 something teen who just has a degree, and it's not easy to survive in that ecosystem. So sometimes people go out and find it really hard to come back. But those who do are thankful that they could. And yeah, it's a little heartbreaking because the youth of Cuba every day is fed information that their country is not good enough for them, that their country is not good. I have a friend who had literally done this experiment where he bought a new phone and he did not mess with the algorithm at all, the YouTubes and the Instagrams and all the social media platforms. And he just scrolled them. And he realized that if he just scrolls without giving any prompts, everything that he'll see is going to be propaganda against Cuba. It's systematically telling them that their nation is not good enough. It's telling them that they are not good enough. We have fancy parties with with embassies where they're systematically designed to tell that this is a way to be. You need to have fancy wine and rum and dark lights and fancy gowns to live a good life. The life that Cubans are leading of walking in a park or sitting by the Malecon or just having a chat with a friend is just not good enough. And it's not that they're the only ones targeted. I think the entire world is told this over and over again that whatever life that we are leading is not good enough. There is something more better, modern, more advanced out there. And a lot of them go chasing that dream also. I can't speak for all of them. I have also been a young person who's been fed the idea that I need to be making a lot of money in life and I need to be having a fancy car and a fancy house and a certain kind of dresses to feel that I'm successful, feel that I'm happy. Having lived in Cuba, I've realized that I don't think happiness is that expensive. But the fact that the young people of Cuba are constantly told this, not just the young people, but the people of Cuba are constantly told that they are not good enough, has certain consequences. One of them being them actively wanting to leave.
Mm. Pina, what are you thinking about this?
Yeah, I would also say that it's very important to, I mean, we all fell in love with Cuba and we love the place. But I do think it's important to acknowledge the hard situation they're having and that not everything is perfect there. Especially regarding, I mean, the whole situation they are in and the governance, like they're like each of us probably has some idea that we think, oh, that should be done differently or that could be done better. And the interesting conversation I had with one person from there is that the reason why they want to leave is to just to have like this opportunity or chance of becoming someone, and fighting for maybe I don't want to say a better life, because that is a very tricky word, but just to have the opportunity to get something and to have dreams and to be able to reach them. They know it's not going to be easy, but just to have that opportunity to fight for their dreams, which many times it's very difficult in Cuba. And yeah, like Karthika said, they don't want to leave, but this is stronger, like this sense of taking care of their families and becoming someone in life, or just having that opportunity, is sometimes stronger than what they have there. However, I think they very well know that they will face many challenges outside, and that they won't be able to knock on the neighbor's door any time of the day and just be part of the family and just feel the connection in the community, because that's not what we are used to in outside of Cuba, or if you want to call it the modern world. Where you have to make an appointment to see someone maybe for weeks in advance, or call even your family. Look, are you home? Can I come? Is it okay now, or maybe tomorrow? And in Cuba, they just go, they knock on the door and just spend time with them there. And this sense of community, of extended family, it's very important, and we kind of forgot about it here, but they have it very present there. So they know they won't have that when they leave the country, and they know it's gonna be hard. But yeah, sometimes other aspects are just stronger. But I think I would also say that for them it always comes with a harsh reality that they are very well aware of. But yeah, the circumstances are hard, and sometimes you just can't have everything, and something is stronger than other. But what was really nice to see there as well is, yeah, this sense of, I am Cuban, I'm proud of being a Cuban, with all the challenges that we have. I'm proud to be Cuban, and I'm proud to be part of Cuba, and that Cuba is part of me, which again, I think that it's you don't see that many times around the world, especially, like, I don't know, for me, coming from Europe, where borders are just a fictional something. Of course, you connect with your nationality, but it's something completely different than what I saw there. Like, sure, I was born here, I like living here, I'm proud to be, a Slovenian in my case, but I don't think we feel it the way they feel it. Like, there's something more in their sense of belonging to their country.
And what's the difference? That's interesting question. So
I don't know if I have a clear answer to that, but just like, I think that in a way that in Cuba, everything is like, everything is connected. All different cities are connected. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter in which city, from which city you are from, you're Cuban. And it's also really interesting for me that they call themselves like a town of Cuba. They when you hear the Cubans talk, they don't say country of Cuba, they say town of Cuba, in their language. And I don't know. I don't have the exact word to describe it, but just, yeah, this connection to one another, to also everything that Kartika already said, is just that in a way everybody there is a family, and I do believe that they have a very different definition of what family is than what we have here. It's not just blood relatives, it's not your partner that you form a family with or something like that. It's just people that surround you. But there, anywhere you come, you're gonna find people that are connected to you, even though you just met them. and I do think that like this sense of community also brings something to the fact that they feel so connected to their town, to their country. um I mean, of course, it makes them also prouder because, yeah, it's not about how much money you have, or everything that you can buy, but it's just to have the to feel happy and rich in your soul, which is something that it's hard to explain with words. I think you have to feel it to fully understand it, because it's not something you can buy. It's something that comes from the people and is for the people. And yeah, definitely something that you have to feel and be part of it to truly understand it.
Beautiful. You know, I'm trying to find some explanations. Maybe so we are speaking about these experiences and feelings when we are in Cuba and how we experienced our connections and uh, relationships with Cubans. I'm trying to understand what formed them to be so special. So is it connected to some specifics of the territory, or that, so again we were speaking about the soul of the cities and of the land, so I think that maybe it's more appropriate to speak definitely of the soul of the place, of the land, of the whole Cuba. Because as you mentioned, there's no difference from what town you are. You are from town Cuba. So yeah, but again, that's what's funny. My own experience. Some just pedestrian walking by came up to me when I was just walking along the Malecon and asked me who am I, what I'm doing in Havana, and I told him that it was my first experience in Havana, in Cuba and in Havana, and he told me that's great that you came to Havana because all these Varadero resorts, that's not Cuba, so it's not true. So Havana is so this was my question is again that it's important to be in the place where the life is not so beautifully created for tourists from abroad, but how people are living in real life. And at the same time, returning to my question, would it, again, we knew that there were some relationships sort of in the first half of 20th century with the US, and Havana was a posh place, and there were lots of interesting things and films about Havana, and very rich people came there. So is it, did this sense of community and values of people change after their blockade, or maybe even because of these sanctions, and that they sort of were for decades cut off of the other world? Or it is innate, sort of inherent feature of Cubans, despite of all the political situations, and it was the same. I understand that you didn't experience it in the beginning of the 20th century, but again, you discussed maybe this with natives, with locals. So how this blockade influenced this sense of connectedness and the sense of the extended family? Or maybe it is innate thing, which was, so again, we discussed the approach of Jose Marti, who is the philosopher, the sort of the religion for people in Cuba. And he expressed the same values long before all these political problems and calamities which people faced in 20th century. So what's your understanding of the reasons of such an unusual understanding of life of Cubans?
Do I go first, or Pina, do you want to take it?
Sure,
All
go.
right. Um, I actually this question did I did wonder about this question for a long time sitting in Cuba because when you think about what today Cubans deem as successful, they're very, it can be considered very materialistic. Oh, you have like, gold chains and like fancy cars and like the best dresses. Those things are aspirational for a lot of Cubans today. And as I was observing this, especially during my last visit to Cuba earlier this year, I couldn't understand how a country which is, or a community, or a group of people who aspire that can advocate for a such a way of life as well at the same time. And this led me to a very interesting conversation with Lil, another Cuban friend that all of us know. Um, and I'm just gonna like a compressed version of a very long conversation. And my understanding of it, of course, was that Cuban culture is very young. Um, when we talk about, I can give my example. So in India, we have like millenniums and like centuries to like read through to understand why the Indian society is the way it is. But the beautiful thing about Cuban and Cuban culture is that it's so dynamic and it could be whatever the people want it to be. So if you go back 100 years, which is not a lot of time when we are talking about cities and countries, you see that maybe that's the oldest recorded like history, that 100 200 years is what in their memory is their history. And that has not defined who they are. Of course, that has influenced who they are today, but that has not defined them, which makes them much more freer than I have felt in my personal experience. Because they can be whatever the people at the time want. So, during the revolution, we saw that there was a change in the way people saw their way of life. And it was a societal change. Everybody in the community, everybody in the country got on, or at that point of time, a lot of people left as well who couldn't get on and who did not agree with. And you see that level of democratization in Cuba. So even today, if there is a policy that needs to be implemented in the state, if it's a policy about which involves, for example, journalism students, it is going to be discussed with the journalism students of the university so that when the policy comes into play, it is their policy. It is the policy of the people. It is not the policy that somebody on top wrote and just gave. Does it happen that every voice gets heard and everybody is always participative? I'm not sure that's true, but there are enough structures and systems in place to make sure that every voice of the present gets heard. And that's what makes up the culture. So it's not just one thing that defines Cubans. So again, the blockade, in many ways, like you mentioned, it has helped them to support each other. And this is something that I mentioned while all of us were in Cuba as well. I think that people in Cuba are okay with lending a helping hand because that just means they have a hand to hold on to as well. It's a lot of that. It's a lot of it's them understanding that they have to be there for each other. They have to support each other because this is a common challenge that the entire nation has felt or experienced together. And that has helped them support each other more in more meaningful ways. They understand that if tomorrow I do not have something, my neighbor is going to show up for me. So it is my duty to show up for them today. The blockade has helped in many ways, which is not the best way to put it because it's been a very cruel system, which has made a lot of lives very difficult. But the way Cubans have dealt with it is very beautiful. It's humanity coming alive in the face of real challenges. But at the same time, it's a very evolving society. You can't say that this is what Cuba is because if 20 years after the next generation feels that this is not how their society is supposed to be, Cuba will change. And that's the beauty of it all, because we can't, and I would even go on to say that if tomorrow the people think that we do not want to be as hospitable as we are, and we want to make sure that our tourists come and we get as much money out of them, and we do not treat them well, and if that is what the society ends up deciding, and I hope that that's not the case, but Cuba will evolve to that. And then the cycle will continue, and then someone would come and say that, hey, this is not okay, this is not human. And then we'll again have that cycle of people coming back and organizing themselves in the way that it makes sense to them at that point of time. So we are talking about a Cuba that we have gotten in touch with, visited, experienced. But based on my very exploratory conversations, of course, these are all thoughts and ideas, I think Cuba can evolve. And I think that's how every society should be. It should be what it wants to be at that point of time. The past should always be a guide, should always be a influence in today, but it should never take over their identity. And I don't think Cuban history does that to them.
Mm, thank you. Nemai, what would you add maybe?
Um, I would also add that all over the world in the past, the sense of community was much stronger than it is right now. And even though, yes, Cuba faces many challenges, as said many times before today, I think in a way, because of all of that, and also because of the blockade, and again, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I would say that the consequence is that in a way they got stuck in time, but in this sense, in the best possible way. Because of, because of the blockade, because of all the challenges, they had to stick together. And that is shown today as well. So for me, Cuba is a way not just not even a political, but like a whole society phenomenon in a way. But yeah, I would say that in a way they got stuck in time, but in a best possible way, because here, or let's say around the world, when we don't face the same challenges as they do, you don't need that community as much to go through the day. We can talk about how important it is to have the community, to have people to rely on, to have help, but I think in our lives that has become a privilege nowadays. It's not something that you necessarily need. You can work, you can do things by yourself, you can pay someone else to do it for you if you have the money. So we can be very much self-efficient. And that has also distanced us from being close to one another. It's just because we don't need that, and it's a matter of decision to have that in life. But there in Cuba, they did need that. They did need their neighbors. They did need, and still do need, their community, their extended family. And so that's why this sense hasn't changed. And I think it's beautiful. And I don't think they fully understand what they have, because they haven't really seen, I mean, those who never left haven't really seen how it is outside of Cuba regarding that specific thing. And I would say that, on a long run, what they have there gives you a much better quality of life than what maybe we have, even though, we can access all the medicine, we can go to a store and buy whatever we want to buy and more. But, on the long run, is that really a quality of life that is better? I mean, that's like my forever question, what is the true definition of quality lifestyle? So yeah, I think that with everything that has happened there, with the blockade, with being an island at the end of the day as well, they got stuck in time a little bit, and they because of that, managed to kept what many other parts of the world have lost because of the modernization.
Definitely, I was listening for you, and when I was born, there was still Soviet Union, and when I started going to school, it still was Soviet Union, and I remember this first. So I was 10 then the Soviet Union ceased its existence, and new Russia appeared, and all this industrialization plus mostly not even Western but American values came to Russia. And I still remember when I was a primary school student, I still remember the same values, and I shared this experience with Violeta as well, because she remembers Yugoslavia and all these socialist ideas, which were also there in the 20th century. So I remember the same, maybe not the same, but very similar values of young children helping elders, of protecting and taking care of each other, of respecting to people who are elder than you, of sharing some resources with your neighbors, of feeling safe in the place where you live, because you understand that their neighboring granny will keep an eye on you because she knows you, and you are growing up in the next door, and she knows you and your family and everything. And we lost it when this capitalist values came, and it was mostly individualistic way of living, and everybody would start taking care of themselves, and we became separate from neighbors, and now we can live at the same block of flats, but we would not know who are the people who are living next door to you, and it seems to be okay. So my question is, first of all, what could be done maybe for Cubans, first of all, by Cubans, and you, Karthika, as Cuban as well. What could be done by people in Cuba? So inevitably, this new world would come, and it already comes to Cuba. So what could be done in order to preserve this way of living in sincerity, in mutual support, in feeling these family bonds with people who are not your blood family, but they might be even more close to you than maybe some family, some blood relatives whom you haven't been seen for ages in Europe or maybe in Asia. So is it possible at all to preserve this way of living? And the next question, the connected question, is, isn't it utopia to hope that these values could be preserved or even taken from Cuba and somehow revitalized, so resurrected in our societies? In Western society, in Slavic societies, which experienced this maybe 30, 40 years ago, we had something similar. But isn't it the utopia to hope that this could be preserved or even taken and sort of implemented in our modern world? So what do you think?
Firstly, I think we're already doing, and when I say we, I mean all of us on this call, all of us who are together in Cuba. I think we are doing our bit, and it might not look like much, but just telling them how our lives have been, and telling them the difference, I because a lot of the reasons as to why Cuba is maybe not able to preserve what they have is a lack of awareness of what they have also. When you're born into an ecosystem where all of this is normal, you don't really question it. You assume that this is how it's supposed to be. And Cuba is the first place I was called self sufficient, and that was not a compliment. I walked into a party, and a friend of mine said, and I think I was maybe getting a cola for myself, and I was trying to find the correct note. And the person was like, "Oh, don't worry, I'll take care of it." And he was like, "No, no, no." And it was my early days in Cuba. So I was just very uncomfortable when people would pay for me. And I would just go in and be like, "Oh, please take it." And then like, Karthika, you know what? You're great, but you're very self-sufficient. And it didn't. I couldn't understand what that meant. And that's what's normal for them. So as maybe it was normal for us. And Marina, that's where you said, I mean, when you were growing up in that ecosystem of the Soviet Union, you have certain memories of that. It's in you. It's not something that you have to learn from others. Humanity is within all of us. Cubans are just very good at projecting it, living it, experiencing it than us. But I and I'm not sure they're aware of the fact of how special all of this is because it's just too normalized for them. So when all of us went, like, I'm sure you would have had experiences when you talk about your life back in your home, and a Cuban would be like, really? I mean, that sounds horrible. I would talk about my work days, and they're like, really? Why would you do that? It did not make sense for them that, oh, I have a family and I have kids in the daycare. Why would I not go at 5 and pick them up? I need to be spending enough time with my family also. These things are just so, they're instilled in their being, in the way of life. Us talking about more about what Cuba is, what is the specialty of Cuba, what is it that makes it all so extraordinary, which Marina, I mean, through your work you're already doing it, bringing those stories out, getting that word out to the world so that we acknowledge it, because sometimes when you don't acknowledge something, even though it exists, they lose the understanding of it. They forget that they exist in the first place. So I think us acknowledging it is a very big part of it. Cuba's isolation was very strategic. It was so that they cease to exist. You ignore them enough so that they think that they're not worth the attention and they forget. And all of the work that all of us are doing just is one step towards giving them the acknowledgement and the respect that they truly do deserve. Um, and also the utopia. I maybe it is. I have been told that I'm quite naive for doing what I'm doing quite a bunch of times. For me now, idealism is the I word. We don't mention it here. It's just too triggering at this point. With the way we see it, at least, just here at 8-1, and the way we see it, it already existed, not just in the Soviet. I mean, I have had even Violetta had a lot of stories to share about Yugoslavia. I 20 like I'm not that old, but like 15 years ago in India, I could have had that story where I was in my neighborhood and everybody in the neighborhood knew each other. But then in the 1990s, we went through the entire liberalization of economies and we lost that. And every society could trace back. And I'm not talking about 100 years, I'm talking about 20, 30 years. And maybe we can get to a place where we remember, even in that nostalgia of the memories where all of us were more human. So maybe it sounds like idealism, and I do not dispute that at all, but it's not impossible. Not because we're being overtly optimistic, but because it has happened before. And the only reason we're not able to get there is because we don't see it in front of our eyes. But we see Cuba and we see that it's been 60 years and 60 years of continuous challenges, continuous change, and it still stands. How can something so real be a utopia?
Beautiful. What do you think, Pina?
Yeah. Um, I mean, the last sentence that Kartika said was really nice, and I very much agree with it. And I would also say that we, and I mean us, everyone else, it's slowly regaining that consciousness about how important are things that you can buy with money, how important is to have a community around yourself. And even though it's gonna, it is going very slowly and we're doing it step by step. Because at the end of the day, we live in a capitalism. But just the fact that I think we are switching slowly back to how it used to be gives me a lot of hope. And when it comes to Cuba, I just hope that the consciousness of the world changes closer to what Cuba still has, then the whole modern concept comes to Cuba. So I just hope that we are quicker in remembering than they are of the mentality of the outside world. But yeah, I do think that it's coming back, and although it seems like a dream, I do want to believe it's a very realistic dream, because also this is what gives me hope. Um, and what we can do is just, when we talk with people from Cuba, is try to explain what they have, even though it's probably hard to explain it because they just don't know any other way. But still, just sometimes it's nice that someone reminds you of how special is something that you take for granted. And I think this is something that we can do, and just tell them, this is not, I mean, it's very nice that it's normal for you, but it's not normal outside of Cuba. So don't take it for granted and cherish what you have, and just have that, like, be conscious about it, and intentionally not change that. But yeah.
Beautiful. And just to finalize our conversation, I would like us maybe to be a little bit practical in terms of, so Pina, Maja, you mentioned what we could do to help Cubans to preserve their uniqueness. Would you name maybe 5 or more, if you want, 5 advices for non-Cuban people, or maybe for yourself, first of all? Let's be a sort of start with ourselves. What 5 advice, 5 tips would you give yourself and others in acting in everyday life, which could be learned from Cubans and bring this not utopian but very good, although maybe a little bit idealistic, but very good, humane understanding of what would it be important to execute in our everyday lives to be more human, and to be more human like Cubans. What would it be?
Mhm.
Who would go first?
You can also go, Kartika, if you already have them.
No, no, no. Please, please go ahead.
I mean, like one thought that came into my mind, and I need to think of the others. It's that things that truly matter in life can't even be thought in our heads, but have to be felt in our hearts. Mm, so I mean, I think that like that is one thing that came to my mind, that it's a nice kind of just reminder also for me in everyday life. And I do think that in Cuba they truly live that. And then probably the next one would be that I mean, the most I think common and shared and already known is that, you know, happiness cannot be bought with money. You can buy things that make you happy, but you don't really achieve the happiness with that. And there are so many other more important things in life. And again, this is something very important for everyone to remember on a daily basis. And then the third would definitely be connected with the community. And just surround yourself with people who are your community. If that doesn't come naturally, do it intentionally. Because even though it's sometimes hard to have big and extended family and can take up time and energy, at the end of the day, it's more than worth it. And having the sense of not being alone has more value that we can imagine until we need that. So, and now I'm passing the word. There were three things I know, but yeah.
That's more than enough. Karthika, what would you share?
Okay, and I know Pina was nice enough to go first, so I had time to think. um, the first lesson that I learned, which is I think the most tangible thing that I've learned, is how are you is a very important question. In Cuba, we always say, Hola, ¿cómo estás? Hello, how are you? We do that in the rest of the world also. But in Cuba, I learned that the answer to that question is incredibly important in whatever context you're in. I remember I was sitting in the office and a friend, like a colleague of mine, walked in and I was like, "Hey, did you get this done?" And that was a very natural instinct for me that, oh, you're in office, we're working, and that was like, "Hey, did you get that done?" And he was like, "Karthika, ask me how I am." And it's like, okay. And he did. And then we spoke for maybe 10 minutes and then we got to work. But it changed a lot. It 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 told the other person that that person was human before a colleague or human before a person who does tasks. So that was my first lesson. Second was that it's okay to be who you are. It's all right. And it's a good thing. It's not just all right, but it's a very good thing that you are who you are, no matter who you are. Um, at least I think young people today feel very uneasy with their own selves because they're constantly something to do, achieve more, be more successful. I have felt that way, and I think many days I do feel that way that maybe I need to be doing more, maybe I've not done enough. But success doesn't define your worth, or one particular thing doesn't define your success, also. If you want to, uh, it's as simple, it's by virtue of you being part of the community, you're worth being around, you're worth the connection, you're worth being friends, you're worth caring for, you're worth being loved. And that makes life a lot more easy. Very, very easy. um, to slow down. This was a very, very important lesson, which I think I'm still learning. Always in a rush. You wake up in the morning to get to a place, to get to a place, to finish a task, to get to a place, to get. We are not still anywhere. At least I wasn't. I think I still struggle with it. I get restless sometimes. But slow down. There is nowhere that we need to be than where we are right now. And when we are rushing, we are nowhere anyway. So to just take it easy. And it's okay to care for yourself. I think that would be fine. It's okay to uh, give yourself a break, to be kind to yourself, and take some time off if you're feeling too frustrated. You're human, and even if you do not do unrealistic, extraordinary things, by virtue of you being human, you're being special anyway. So be kind to yourself. That would be the fifth lesson. I'm still learning most of them. I feel these are just too big of messages, even for me, and like especially for me actually. Um, but yeah, Cuba has taught me this. I think I'm just learning to follow through.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I would like also to share. First of all, maybe I picked something from your Kartika's words today. So first of all, no judgment. I think it's a very important point, and no judging differences, and taking care of those who need help, despite of the fact that maybe you have some limitations or scarcity yourself. Share what you have with those who need. It's important, and this being generous in this very moment, without thinking that perhaps I will need it sometime in the future. Just share it just right now because somebody needs it here and now. That's a good lesson as well. What I learned while being in Cuba and speaking mostly with Natalia and others is it's really important. And again, that's the basis of all the religions, and including Indian philosophy as well, is focusing on abundance, not on the scarcity. It's so, it seems to be so easy, but it's so difficult when you don't have enough resources. And at the same time, being focused on what could be done, on what could be learned, what can be created in these limited resources, but together, it's incredible. And the results can be a miracle. You can do absolutely fantastic things if you focus on the opportunities, on the mutual support, on the abundance of the community, instead of thinking about what you don't have in here and now. And in some magic ways, resources are appearing, maybe not all of them, but you can create something absolutely special. Of course, this is connected with the conscious consumption, and this absolutely fantastic. I understand that this is not because of the taking care of planet and so on and so forth. It's because of scarcity. But again, we can learn a lot from Cubans on how we can reuse, recycle, and make things live much longer than it is usually done in Europe and in Americas. And the last, but maybe most important, is focusing on similarities, not on differences. that if you are curious, and again, it's I think it's connected. It's again about this innovative way of thinking because of scarcity, first of all, but again, it gives some creativity on how you can find ways to do something together. So you mentioned, Kartika, these similarities that some my relatives are from Asia, some so people are focusing on not on divisions but on their connections, on their similarities, on some beautiful things which could be done in this connectivity. And I think that this is a very important lesson, and it becomes more and more important in today's divided world, because until we understand, all of us, that we are all human beings, first of all, and we have much more similar and much more in common than differences between us, this can help, this can teach people a lot. And again, I am still not sure that it's not a utopian thing, but at least if we could try to give some small, plant some small seeds of this humanity, of this kindness, of this curiosity, of this restless creativity, if we can bring it from Cuba, not only inspire Cubans save this in their approaches, but also if we can share these ideas with all people with whom we connect in different countries, this can at least maybe help a little to fix our maybe not, I don't like this big words about broken world, but something strange in our world. So I think that maybe some good improvements could be brought from Cuba to all other peoples and nations.
Sure.
What would you like to say, maybe a couple of words in conclusion, to summarize this conversation, or maybe to highlight some ideas which came up to you during our conversation, some insights, some maybe things what could be discussed in continuation. So some feedback and some summary of what we have
Right.
discussed.
Um, well, I had a thought. We've spent an entire hour talking about the beauty of Cuba, and with your remarks, actually, Marina, I realized that maybe it is not a completely broken world. I think I agree with you. There is something a little strange, but it's not broken. Because if it was broken, then we would not have found each other. Our ecosystem of people from around the world, and they are from around the world, uh, they have their own pockets of humanity, live, vibrant, doing beautiful work. Um, what I think it has enabled all of us, what our experience in Cuba has enabled all of us to do is identify that humanity in the rest of the world as well. And I think it's about calling that out that, hey, you're here as well. And then you slowly look and you see that it's everywhere. It's just not been acknowledged, it's just not been engaged with. Because it's usually a reality gets shaped by the loudest voice in the room. And right now, we're not the loudest voice. When I say we, I mean everybody doing the kind of work that we do, uh, talking about people and communities the way that we do. But what happens when all of us get together and we start identifying and cherishing and valuing? So, as Pina Maya had talked about the things that Cubans should do, which is not take this for granted and value it and cherish it. I completely agree. Um, and this is a thought that I will take back after this conversation, that I would want to cherish the connections that I have built, not just in Cuba but outside of it as well, because I have met incredibly beautiful and incredibly uh, extraordinary human beings, not because they've done something out of the blue, but they've just been so human in a world where it's very difficult to be human. We see it every day. So my concluding remarks would be that I personally try and do a better job at identifying it, cherishing it, and supporting it in whatever way I can.
Thank you. Maja.
Mm, I think that what I am taking home from this discussion is the realization that you know, people are, at least for me, people are the true soul of the place or the city, and Cuba just embodies that. Yes, they have beautiful nature, so does all the world. Yes, they have interesting architecture, so does, so you can find it as well in other places. But what's really special there are the people. And actually, that's the case anywhere in the world. People at the end of the day, and people, the community, it's what makes a good or bad experience when you go somewhere. It's what fills up the memories. It's what teaches you, whatever you take home from the place you go. So I never realized it up until this moment, just how important people in the humanity are for each place that exists, and just how special the Cubans are made me realize how important this is, no matter the place in the world that we're talking about. So yeah, I think that what makes Cuba Cuba, and it's our people there, and they are for me the real soul of the city of Cuba, and of all the others as well.
Beautiful. Girls, thank you. It was fantastic. Thank you so much. I think that's this conversation was, for me, it was precious, definitely. So warm, so kind. So I was just, I realized that I was smiling and my cheeks are aching already out of smile, but that's so pleasant. Yes, I will stop the recording. And I was also